We've talked about bugs that kill people, about pressure and silence, about privacy, bias, and pipelines that lie. And through all of it, the advice had been some version of speak up, document it, make the decision makers own their decisions. But what happens when you do all of that and nothing changes? That's what this episode is about. I'm Imola, this is Purdy Quality, and this is the question I've been building towards this whole series of ethical testing. In 2021, a product manager at Facebook named Frances Haugen walked out the door for the last time. On her way out, she copied tens of thousands of internal documents. She gave them to journalists, then she testified before the US Senate. The documents showed that Facebook's own internal research had found that its products were causing measurable harm to teenagers' mental health, to political discourse, to how people understand the pandemic, and that those findings had been repeatedly set aside not because nobody saw them, but because acting on them would hurt engagement metrics. Here's what I want you to understand about Haugen. She didn't do this on a whim. She had spent months trying to raise those concerns internally. She had filed official reports. She had escalated. She had followed the process. And nothing had changed. So she made a different decision. One she knew would cost her professionally, personally, and even legally. She made it with open eyes. Now, most of us will never be in that position. Most of us don't work on products that affect billions of people, and most of our concerns don't require congressional testimony. But the shape of the problem is the same. I tried the internal route, it didn't work. Something harmful is continuing. So what do I do? The shape shows up in software teams, it shows up in QA, and nobody talks about it honestly. Before we get to the dramatic end of the spectrum, let me slow down for a second. Because I think a lot of people hear escalation and whistleblowing and they imagine a binary here. Either you stay silent or you go to the press. That's not how this works. There's a whole ladder between those two things. And the most people never get the dramatic end because they resolve things earlier if they know how to use the ladder. So let me walk you through it. The escalation is a ladder, not a leap. Rung 1, the ticket comment. You see something, you write it down, date stamped, your name attached. Rung 2, you raise it in a meeting, out loud, in front of people. Rung 3, you follow up when nothing happens. You send the email, you reference a ticket, you ask the question again. The fourth, you put in writing to your manager, not as a complaint, as a professional concern. I want to make sure we are aware of this risk, for example. Rung 5, you go above your manager. You escalate to a decision maker who can actually act on it. Each rung carries more friction than the last. That is fine. More friction is appropriate for more serious concerns. Here's the mistake most people make. They file a concern at rung 1, see no response, and conclude the organization doesn't care. So they either give up or they jump all the way to rung 5 in frustration and blow up the relationship they didn't need to. Most concerns that go unaddressed at rung 1 gets resolved at rung 3 or 4. Not because the company suddenly grew a conscience. Because visible, documented, and persistent concerns are harder to ignore than verbal ones. And the ladder works. You just have to actually climb it. So a practical tip, before you decide the system doesn't care, ask yourself, have I written down? Have I followed up? Have I escalated at least one level? If the answer to any of those is no, you are not at the top of the ladder yet. So you have way more space to do. Documentation. Not documentation as bureaucratic exercise. Documentation as a self-protection. Every concern you raise should exist in writing. A ticket comment, an email, a Slack message in channel with timestamps. Not because you are building a legal case, because when something eventually goes wrong, the story of what was known and when will be assembled from whatever written record exists. If the only record is a concern you raised verbally in a stand-up 6 months ago, you have no record. If there's a ticket comment with a date and a clear statement of the risk and a question about who is making the call, you have a record. Let me give you a low-stakes example of why this matters. A tester I know, let's call him Pete, flagged a concern during checkout flow testing. User who hit the back button after the payment confirmation were sometimes seeing an ambiguous screen that could read as failed transaction. Not a crash, not a data loss, just a confusing state that might cause double submissions. It was logged in the comment, discussed in a meeting, and even marked as low priority monitor in production. Pete moved on. 3 months later, the support team reported a spike in duplicate payment complaints. Someone pulled the ticket history. Pete's comment was there, dated, specific, unambiguous. The conversation that followed was about fixing the problem and not about who knew what. That is the documentation doing its job, not dramatically, just quietly making accountability possible. The alternative, the concern raised in a stand-up that nobody wrote down, means the conversation that follows a production incident starts with, "Why didn't anyone flag this?" And that's a much harder room to be in. Now, let's see a little bit where the line is between loyalty and complicity. At some point in a serious escalation, you will feel the pull of loyalty to your team, to your company, to the manager who has been good for you, to colleagues who will be caught up in whatever comes next. That pull is real, and I don't want to dismiss it. Loyalty is a value. Caring about the people around you is legitimate and human. What it's not is a trump card. You can be a loyal team member and an honest professional. Those two things coexist fine in most situations. When you are raising a concern about a medium severity bug in a low stakes feature, loyalty and honesty are the same thing. The line is this: when loyalty to your organization requires you to be silent about harm, reaching real users, people outside the room, people who never agreed to be part of this, loyalty has crossed into complicity. Not when it becomes uncomfortable, not when your manager is annoyed. It's when the people bearing the consequences are people who had no say in the decision and no way to protect themselves from it. Testers occupy a specific and very important position here. You are often the last person in the chain who sees what the product looks like before it reaches users. You have information nobody else has in quite the same form. That position comes with real ethic weight, not the weight of fixing everything, the weight of being honest about what you see. I should also ask the question, what does this do to your career? And the honest answer is that in short term, being the person who raises uncomfortable concerns can create friction. You might be seen as difficult. You might lose a point in performance review. A relationship might get strained. But in long term, and I want to be very direct about this, the people who get trusted with serious work, who get brought into hard decisions, who get asked to team leads, they are almost always the people known from being honest. Not comfortable, not frictionless, but honest. The tester who spent years quietly signing off things they had doubts about is not building career. They are building a record of silence that helps nobody, including themselves. And I know that sounds easy to say. I know the financial reality is real. I know the job market in your region matters. I know some people cannot afford the risk of speaking up, and that is genuinely constrained. But here's what I found. There is almost always a middle ground between approve this with my blessing and quit in protest. Professional integrity compounds, and so does the lack of it. So what about when you are genuinely exhausted the ladder and you've documented, escalated, and even followed up, and the answer is still no? And this is the hardest part, and I'm going to be honest with you, there is no clean answer here. In the EU, the Whistleblower Protection Directive gives legal protection for reporting certain categories of breach through official channels. In the US, protections vary by sector but exist in areas including financial services and healthcare. These protections are real. They also don't make the professional consequences disappear. Frances Haugen had legal counsel before she acted. She had thought through what she was prepared to lose. She made a decision with open eyes, and that is the standard for the far end of the spectrum. Not heroism, but deliberate, documented, and informed choice made by someone who has tried every internal route first. Most of us will never get there, but knowing the route exists and knowing how to document your way through of it is needed and is part of being a professional in a field where your work affects real people. In previous videos, we talked about radiation machine that killed patients because nobody has thought carefully about what happened when a safety interlock was bypassed. We went through pressure, silence, privacy, bias, AI, and the accumulated weight of small decisions that add up to harm nobody chooses. Testers see things other people don't. They see the product before it meets the user. They see the gaps between what was specified and what was built. They see also the edge cases that were decided out of scope. That position carries genuine ethical weight. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to blow the whistle on Senate committee. You have to be honest in writing about what you see. You have to make the people making decisions own those decisions visibly. And you have to keep saying it calmly even when it's uncomfortable. And that's the job. That's the whole job. So drop a comment with the biggest takeaway you are walking away with, or the hardest situation you've been and that you wish you'd handle differently. I read all of them. If this series is useful, share it with someone on your team. So test responsibly and look out for each other. See you in the next episode.